So when you're starting a totally new round, which is what we're going to be doing today, and to just explain what round means in this instance, because obviously a lot of you will be used to the kind of amigurumi style crochet and rounds. What I mean by a round is we made this square in the middle first, so this panel, then this panel. And then what we've done is we've gone round and we've filled in 4 panels around the edges so that it becomes a complete square. What we're now going to be doing is working another square that goes right the way around that edge, and your blanket will always finish with a complete round. So the decision that you've then got to make about how big you want your blanket to ultimately be, you'll always finish when you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 panels in place around the outside, so it is a finished square. So when we start this next round, and this is going to go for whenever you start a new round, what you need to do, get your stitch marker at the front again, so you're right side facing, get the last panel that you made at the top, that will make your stitch marker at the bottom, and rotate it by 180 degrees. So it means that the last panel you worked is at the bottom, and we're going to be working into the opposite to that. And that goes for whether you're right-handed or left-handed, because obviously it's 180 degrees. So it's the complete opposite side that we're going to work when starting a new round. So today is our final stitch texture that we're going to master, but a disclaimer, it probably is the most challenging, because what we're going to be doing is actually picking up in our pattern stitch. So today we're going to do a cluster, as we've called it in the pattern. It's a bit like a small puff stitch, effectively, which you will see it's very useful in lots of different patterns. So it's a slightly different take on the bobble, as you'll see when we start to do it. And that's this row here. You see in the yellow that you can see going into this cocoa. So we're actually going to be doing these clusters as we pick up the stitches, and that's what makes it a little bit more challenging. So I'm going to be using my mushroom yarn, and we're actually initially going to be working into these stitches, so across your waffle panel. So put your hook into the stitch, because we are actually working the stitches this time. We're not going into gaps initially. And chain 2. And then treble a normal stitch into your next one, before we then start these clusters. So what we're going to be doing with the cluster, round your hook first and in the stitch, yarn over and bring it back through, and then pull it upwards to be the same height as your stitches. So what you're going to do is don't keep it nice and tight and low. You actually want to pull it up to be the same height. So that's once we've done that. We're going to do that a second time, like that, and then we're going to do that a third time. So round hook and pull it through. So what you will end up with is 7 loops on your hook like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 loops. And then what you do is you yarn over and you come through all those loops in one go. Then you do a chain 1, which just kind of locks that into position and neatens that up nicely. And then underneath, to account for that chain 1, we're going to miss this stitch, and then we're going to cluster again into the next one. So the cluster, round your hook, in that stitch, bring it through and up. So it's a longer stitch, so it's at the same height. So you've got 3 loops at that stage, back in. Same thing again. Same thing again, so you've got your 7 loops on your hook, then yarn over, come through all those loops in one go, then chain 1 to lock them in and neaten them up. You're missing 1 underneath, and then you're going back in and working another cluster. So you go right the way across into the edge of that waffle stitch panel, doing that cluster 1, miss 1, cluster 1, miss 1. So then I've come to the end of my waffle section that I've been working into. So just to recap, you'll have your chain, you'll have your treble, then you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 of those clusters. Then you've chained 1 at the top, so you're missing the last one of those on the waffles. And now we're going to be working into our rows. So what you need to do is view each row gap as 2 stitches so that you can continue in this same pattern. So go round and work your first cluster into the row gap. And then when you chain one, that's effectively then acting as the second stitch that would be viewed in that row gap. So all you're going to do is go in and do a cluster into the next one. And the same again. Ooh, if you ever drop it off like that, don't panic. You can just pull it backwards and go again. So do you see, it can be quite tricky getting that hook through all those different wraps. My only tip really is watch your hook position as much as possible, because it's the rotation of that hook downwards that will make your life easier when getting all those wraps through like that. So then you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters worked into the edge of that basket weave section, and then finish on 2 trebles, normal trebles into that gap, because that forms that border as we've been doing on every panel. So 2 normal trebles like that, and that's your first line of clusters in. So then for the second row, what you need to do is turn it round, and we're going to come back. So start normally with your chain 2 and then your treble 1 to form that edge. So exactly the same as we've been doing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to treble 1 into the top of the cluster. So your first one, you're going to treble into the top of your cluster, like that. And then your second one, you're actually going to treble into the gap between the clusters there. And that's the repeat that you're then doing, is you treble 1 into the top of the cluster and then 1 into the gap in between. So a nice and easy return row. 1 into the top of your cluster, 1 into the gap in between. So then turn, and we're just repeating the same thing. We're doing a cluster row, but this time obviously working into nice, easy to find stitches. I just want to clarify that when you are working these stitches, it is those twists. You see how I turned it towards myself? It is these V's on the top that you're going to be working into, not anything that you can see down the back there. So you chain your 2. Then you do your treble 1, and it's, see how I've got it right the way through that nice clear V like that. So that's your edge with your treble. And then we're back to doing our clusters again. So same repeat, 1, 2, 3, yarn over through the lot, and then a chain 1, miss your 1 underneath, and you're going again for that same repeat. So go right the way across this section, working that same pattern of cluster 1, miss 1 with that chain on top. So with that cluster panel, we have now effectively finished the crochet along, and that's because you have already now done 1 of each panel in those 7 different sampler stitches that we've been making in this sampler blanket. So from now on in, what we're doing is exactly the same theory and stitches that we've done, but each panel will get bigger. So every panel that you make from now on in will take a little bit longer than the previous ones, and will take a lot more yarn as your blanket starts to grow. So from tomorrow onwards, really, it's going to be the theory of how you continue on following this pattern, making each panel get different in the colours that you have chosen. Then I'll be finishing off with the border and a little bit about washing and blocking. So see you again tomorrow for a new panel.